Naomi Carter's hands were shaking as she stood outside the federal building in Manhattan. It was a cold February morning, the kind that cuts through your coat and settles in your bones. But Naomi wasn't shaking from the cold. She was shaking because in 15 minutes, she was going to walk into that building and destroy a man's life the way he'd destroyed hers. 3 years. It had taken her 3 years to get to this moment. 3 years of planning, of sacrifice, of becoming someone she barely recognized. 3 years of living with rage, so intense it burned through her chest every single day. But before we get to the ending, let me tell you how it all began. 5 years ago, Naomi Carter was on top of the world. At 28, she was one of the youngest senior analysts at a prestigious investment firm in New York. She had a beautiful apartment in Brooklyn, a successful career, and a brilliant mind for predictive algorithms. She'd spent 4 years developing a revolutionary AI system that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. Her bosses loved her. Her colleagues respected her. And she was about to make partner. Then she met Julian Cross. Julian Cross was everything Naomi wasn't. Wealthy, connected, charming in that effortless way that comes from never having to try. At 42, he'd built Cross Tech Industries into a $15 billion empire. He was on magazine covers, gave TED Talks, and was considered one of the most innovative minds in technology. When Julian approached Naomi's firm about a potential partnership, he specifically requested to meet with her. He'd heard about her algorithm, he said. He wanted to learn from the best. Naomi should have been suspicious. Looking back, all the signs were there. But Julian was brilliant at what he did. Not technology, but manipulation. He made Naomi feel seen, valued, special. He asked about her research with genuine curiosity. He challenged her intellectually in ways no one else did. Over the course of 6 months, they had dozens of meetings. Always professional. Always about the work. But there was something else there too. A connection that Naomi tried to ignore because Julian was a client. Because he was married. Because mixing business with anything personal was a line she'd never crossed. Julian never crossed that line either. He was too smart for that. Instead, he built her trust. He made her believe he saw her as an equal, as a genius, as someone whose work could change the world. Then he made her an offer she couldn't refuse. Leave your firm, Julian said over coffee one morning. Come work directly for me. I'll triple your salary, give you equity in Cross Tech, and unlimited resources to develop your algorithm. No corporate bureaucracy, no credit sharing. This will be your project, Naomi. Your legacy. Naomi hesitated. It seemed too good to be true. I know what you're thinking, Julian said, reading her doubt. But I'm not trying to take advantage of you. I'm trying to invest in brilliance. Your algorithm could revolutionize how we approach market predictions, automated trading, even global economics. But you're stuck at a firm that doesn't fully appreciate what they have. I do. He slid a contract across the table. The numbers were staggering. More money than Naomi had ever imagined making. Equity that would make her wealthy beyond her dreams. Think about it, Julian said. But don't think too long. Opportunity doesn't wait forever. Naomi thought about it for exactly 3 days. Then she signed. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you're enjoying this. Thank you. The first 6 months at Cross Tech were everything Julian promised. Naomi had a state-of-the-art lab, a team of brilliant developers, and unlimited funding. Her algorithm was developing faster than she'd ever imagined possible. Julian checked in regularly, always encouraging, always supportive. He threw a company-wide event celebrating Naomi's 1-year anniversary, calling her the brilliant mind who's going to revolutionize our industry. Naomi felt valued. She felt seen. For the first time in her career, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Then everything changed. It started small. Julian began asking more technical questions about the algorithm, questions that went beyond casual curiosity. He wanted to see the code, understand the architecture, know exactly how it worked. I like to understand all our major projects, he explained when Naomi expressed mild concern. Don't worry, I'm not going to steal your work. I just want to be able to speak intelligently about it to investors. Naomi showed him everything. Why wouldn't she? He was her boss, her mentor, the man who'd believed in her when no one else had. 2 weeks later, Naomi discovered that Julian had filed patents on her algorithm. Under his name. Under Cross Tech's ownership. Every single innovation she'd developed, registered as his intellectual property. When Naomi confronted him, Julian's entire demeanor changed. Gone was the warm mentor. In his place was a cold businessman who looked at her like she was a naive child. "You signed a contract, Naomi," Julian said, sliding a document across his desk. "Everything you develop while employed by Crosstech belongs to Crosstech. That's standard practice." "But you said it would be my project," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "You said it would be my legacy." "And it will be," Julian replied smoothly. "You'll be credited as a contributor. Your name will be in the footnotes. But this is my company, and anything created here is mine." "That's not what you promised," Naomi said, anger building in her chest. "You lied to me." Julian's expression hardened. "I made you an offer. You accepted it. If you didn't read the fine print, that's your failure, not mine. Now, I suggest you get back to work. We have deadlines to meet." Naomi stood there, stunned. The man she'd trusted, the mentor she believed in, had played her like a fool. But it got worse. So much worse. When Naomi refused to continue working on the project under these conditions, Julian fired her. But he didn't just fire her, he destroyed her. Within 24 hours, rumors began circulating in the industry. Naomi Carter had stolen proprietary information from her previous firm. Naomi Carter had falsified research data. Naomi Carter was unstable, unprofessional, couldn't be trusted. None of it was true. But Julian Cross had power, connections, and a PR team that could make any lie sound like truth. Naomi tried to fight back. She hired lawyers, but Julian's legal team was bigger, better, more expensive. She tried to prove the algorithm was hers, but all the patents were in Julian's name, and the contract she'd signed gave Crosstech ownership of anything she created. She tried to get another job, but no one would hire her. Julian's whisper campaign had made her toxic in the industry. Within 6 months, Naomi had lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her savings, all gone. She had to sell her apartment to pay legal fees that went nowhere. She moved back to her hometown in Ohio, broke and broken. Her parents tried to help, but they were retired and living on a fixed income. Her few remaining friends didn't know what to say. The brilliant, successful Naomi Carter they'd known had disappeared, replaced by this hollow, defeated version of herself. Naomi spent 6 months in a dark depression. She barely left her childhood bedroom. She stopped eating properly. She thought about ending it all more times than she could count. Then one day, she was scrolling through news articles and saw Julian Cross on the cover of Forbes. Tech visionary revolutionizes market predictions with groundbreaking AI. He was being celebrated for her work, her algorithm, her innovation, and he was making billions from it. Something inside Naomi snapped. Not broke, snapped into sharp, crystalline focus. Julian Cross had taken everything from her, so she was going to take everything from him. Revenge isn't something that happens overnight. It requires patience, planning, and a willingness to become someone you're not. Naomi spent the next 3 years preparing. First, she changed her appearance. She cut her natural hair into a short, professional bob and dyed it auburn. She lost weight. She got contact lenses instead of her signature glasses. She changed her entire style, from the comfortable, practical clothes she used to wear to sharp, expensive-looking pieces from thrift stores. Then she changed her name. Legally, Naomi Carter became Simone Mitchell. She moved to Chicago and got a job at a small tech consulting firm. Nothing high-profile, nothing that would draw attention. She rebuilt her skills, stayed under the radar, and studied Julian Cross like he was a dissertation. She learned everything about him. His company structure, his business practices, his vulnerabilities. She discovered that Crosstech, despite its public success, was built on shaky ground. Julian had been cutting corners, manipulating data, and engaging in borderline illegal practices to maintain his empire's growth. More importantly, Naomi discovered she wasn't Julian's only victim. There were others, talented people who'd been exploited, stolen from, discarded when they were no longer useful. But they were all too afraid or too broken to fight back. Naomi wasn't afraid anymore. And she definitely wasn't broken. After 2 years of preparation, Naomi, now Simone, applied for a senior analyst position at Crosstech under her new identity. She had new credentials, new references, a carefully constructed background that would pass any standard background check. Julian's HR department called her for an interview within a week. Sitting in that waiting room, about to see Julian for the first time in 3 years, Naomi felt her heart racing. She looked different enough that she was confident he wouldn't recognize her. But part of her wanted him to. Part of her wanted to see the recognition in his eyes, wanted him to know that she'd come back. But revenge required patience. When Naomi walked into Julian's office for the final interview, he looked up from his computer and smiled. That same charming smile that had fooled her once before. "Simone Mitchell," he said, standing to shake her hand. "Your credentials are impressive. Tell me, what makes you want to work at Crosstech?" Naomi looked into the eyes of the man who destroyed her life and smiled back. "I've always admired companies that value innovation above all else," she said smoothly. "Crosstech represents everything I aspire to achieve in my career." Julian smiled wider. "I think you'll fit in perfectly here." He had no idea who she was. No idea that the woman sitting across from him was the ghost of a person he'd destroyed. Naomi got the job. For the first 6 months, Naomi played the perfect employee. She was brilliant but not threatening, ambitious but not aggressive. She built relationships, earned trust, and slowly worked her way into increasingly sensitive projects. Julian barely noticed her. To him, she was just another talented analyst in a company full of them. Exactly what Naomi wanted. But at night, in her small Chicago apartment, Naomi was building something else, a comprehensive case against Julian Cross. Every unethical practice, every stolen idea, every manipulated report. She documented everything, collected evidence, built connections with other victims. She also discovered something she hadn't expected. Julian's marriage was falling apart. His wife, Victoria, suspected he was having affairs, which he was, frequently and carelessly. More importantly, Victoria was planning to divorce him and take half his fortune. Naomi also learned that Crosstech was in financial trouble. The growth Julian had been reporting to investors was largely fabricated. The company was over-leveraged, overspending, and under-delivering. Julian had been using creative accounting and manipulation to hide the problems, but it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. Naomi realized she didn't need to destroy Julian. She just needed to accelerate his company's existing trajectory toward implosion and make sure everyone knew his crimes when it happened. 1 year after starting at Crosstech, Naomi got promoted to a position with access to the company's financial systems. This was what she'd been working toward: the ability to see everything, to document everything, to build an unassailable case. That's when Julian started paying attention to her. "Simone," he said one day, calling her into his office. "I've been watching your work. You're exceptional. Remind me why we didn't hire you sooner." Naomi's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm just grateful for the opportunity to contribute to such an innovative company." Julian studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "There's something familiar about you. Have we met before?" "I don't think so," Naomi said carefully. "I would definitely remember meeting you." Julian smiled. "Well, I'd like to work more closely with you on some sensitive projects. Projects that require discretion and brilliant analytical minds." Interested, every instinct screamed at Naomi to refuse. But this was exactly what she needed: closer access, more trust, better evidence. "I'd be honored," she said. Working closely with Julian was torture. Naomi had to sit across from him, take his direction, and pretend to respect him while her entire body burned with rage. But she also saw things she'd never seen before: the full extent of his corruption, his manipulation, his absolute lack of conscience. Julian was systematically destroying competitors through corporate espionage. He was stealing technology from smaller companies, then burying them in lawsuits they couldn't afford to fight. He was manipulating stock prices through false announcements. And he was still doing exactly what he'd done to Naomi: finding brilliant people, exploiting their work, and discarding them. One evening, after a late meeting, Julian invited Naomi for drinks. "You remind me of someone I used to work with," he said, pouring expensive scotch. "Brilliant woman. Had incredible potential. But she couldn't handle the pressure of real innovation. Fell apart completely." Naomi's hand tightened on her glass. "What happened to her?" Julian shrugged. "No idea. Probably working some dead-end job somewhere. Bitter about how her career turned out. Some people just don't have what it takes to succeed at this level." Naomi looked at the man across from her, casually dismissing the life he'd destroyed, rewriting history to make himself the hero, and felt something crystallize inside her. She wasn't just going to expose Julian's crimes. She was going to make sure he felt every ounce of pain he'd inflicted on her and others. That's unfortunate, Naomi said calmly. She must have worked very hard only to have it end that way. That's business, Julian said, raising his glass. Only the strongest survive. Naomi raised her glass and smiled. To survival. The beginning of the end started with a phone call. Naomi had spent months building relationships with other cross-tech employees who'd been victimized by Julian. She'd also connected with former employees, competitors, and even some of Julian's business partners who'd grown suspicious of his practices. She'd compiled everything into a comprehensive file: evidence of corporate espionage, financial fraud, stolen intellectual property, securities fraud, and multiple other crimes. She'd given copies to trusted journalists, to federal investigators, and to lawyers representing Julian's victims. But Naomi wanted more than Julian being arrested. She wanted him to feel betrayed the way she'd felt betrayed. She wanted him to experience loss the way she'd experienced loss. So she did something dangerous, something that crossed a line from justice into vengeance. Naomi had discovered that Julian kept extremely sensitive information on a private server, information that would destroy not just his company, but his entire reputation. Affairs with employees, bribes to officials, evidence that he'd known about dangerous defects in cross-tech products but had hidden them to protect profits. Naomi had access to this server through her work. She could leak everything, destroy him completely and permanently. The night she planned to do it, Naomi sat in her apartment with her laptop open, her finger hovering over the enter key. One keystroke. That's all it would take. Julian Cross would lose everything: his company, his fortune, his freedom, his reputation. He would be exposed as the monster he truly was. Naomi's phone rang. It was her mother. "Sweetheart, I know you're busy," her mother said, "but I wanted to check on you. You sounded strange the last time we talked." "I'm fine, Mom," Naomi said, though her voice cracked slightly. "Naomi, I know you," her mother said gently. "I know you're still angry about what happened, but anger like that will poison you from the inside. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think will make things right, please be careful. Please don't lose yourself in the process of trying to hurt someone else." After hanging up, Naomi stared at her laptop screen. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Don't lose yourself. But wasn't she already lost? Wasn't Naomi Carter already gone, replaced by this person who'd spent 3 years planning revenge, who'd lived a lie, who was about to commit crimes of her own in the name of justice? Naomi closed her laptop without pressing enter. The next morning, Naomi walked into the federal building and met with the FBI agents who'd been investigating Julian Cross based on the evidence she and others had provided. "We have enough to bring charges," Agent Rodriguez told her. "Corporate espionage, securities fraud, multiple counts of intellectual property theft. But we need someone willing to testify, someone with inside knowledge." "I'll testify," Naomi said. "But first, I need to tell you something." She told them everything. About who she really was, about what Julian had done to her, about how she'd infiltrated his company under a false identity. "What you did was illegal," Agent Rodriguez said. "Identity fraud, potentially corporate espionage yourself. You could face charges." "I know," Naomi said, "but I also documented real crimes. Everything in my evidence is legitimate. The question is whether you want to prosecute those crimes or focus on how the evidence was obtained." Agent Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. "Why are you coming to us now? Why not just leak everything yourself?" Naomi thought about that question. Why had she stopped? Why hadn't she pressed that button and watched Julian burn? "Because I realized that destroying him wouldn't give me back what I lost," Naomi said quietly. "It wouldn't heal me. It wouldn't make me whole again. All it would do is make me more like him, someone willing to break laws and hurt people to get what I want." "So what do you want?" Agent Rodriguez asked. "Justice," Naomi said. "Real justice. I want Julian Cross to be held accountable through the legal system. I want other victims to see that speaking up matters. And I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror without seeing someone I don't recognize." Agent Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." 3 months later, the indictments came down. Julian Cross was arrested on multiple federal charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just what Naomi had provided, but corroborating documentation from other victims, witnesses, and investigators. Cross-tech stock plummeted. Investors fled. Partners canceled contracts. The empire Julian had built began to crumble. Julian's lawyers tried to fight, but there was too much evidence from too many sources. Eventually, faced with the possibility of decades in prison, Julian took a plea deal. 15 years in federal prison, full restitution to victims, and the complete dissolution of Cross-Tech Industries. On the day of Julian's sentencing, Naomi sat in the courtroom, not as Simone Mitchell, as herself, Naomi Carter, using her real name for the first time in 3 years. Julian saw her from across the courtroom, and for the first time, recognition flashed in his eyes. He understood who she was, what she'd done, how completely he'd underestimated her. The judge asked if any victims wanted to make statements. Naomi stood. 3 years ago, Julian Cross didn't just steal my work, Naomi said, her voice steady. He stole my career, my reputation, my sense of self-worth. He made me believe I was worthless, that what happened was my fault for trusting him. He made me want to stop existing. She looked directly at Julian. For a long time, I wanted revenge. I wanted to hurt you the way you hurt me. I planned it, prepared for it, almost executed it. But then I realized something. Revenge wouldn't give me back what I lost. It wouldn't heal the damage. It would just create more damage. What gave me my life back wasn't destroying you, Naomi continued. It was choosing not to. It was choosing to pursue justice instead of vengeance, to rebuild myself instead of just tearing you down. You took 3 years of my life. I'm not giving you any more. She sat down, feeling lighter than she had in years. The judge sentenced Julian to the maximum term allowed under the plea agreement. After the trial, things didn't magically become perfect for Naomi. She still faced legal questions about her use of a false identity. Eventually, prosecutors decided not to bring charges, recognizing that her actions, while legally questionable, had exposed genuine crimes and protected future victims. Naomi worked with lawyers to reclaim her intellectual property rights. The algorithm she developed was recognized as her creation, and she received a substantial settlement from Cross-Tech's liquidation. More importantly, Naomi began to heal. She started therapy, working through the trauma of betrayal and the darkness of nearly becoming someone she wasn't. She reconnected with old friends and colleagues who'd believed her all along. She started consulting work, helping other victims of corporate theft pursue justice. 1 year after Julian's sentencing, Naomi was sitting in a coffee shop when a young woman approached her nervously. "Are you Naomi Carter?" the woman asked. Naomi nodded, suddenly wary. "I'm Jessica Torres," the woman said. "I worked at Cross-Tech 3 years ago. Julian stole my designs and fired me when I complained. I saw your testimony. It made me realize I wasn't alone, that it wasn't my fault. I filed my own lawsuit now. I just wanted to say thank you for being brave enough to speak up." Naomi felt tears pricking her eyes. "You're brave too. And you're right. You're not alone." They talked for an hour. Jessica shared her story. Naomi listened, offered advice, and connected her with resources that could help. Walking home that evening, Naomi realized something profound. The revenge she'd almost taken would have destroyed Julian, but it would have helped no one else. By choosing justice instead, she'd created a path for other victims to follow. Her pain had meaning beyond just her own story. 2 years after Julian's sentencing, Naomi was invited to speak at a conference about corporate ethics and protecting intellectual property. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, Naomi told her story. Not with bitterness or rage, but with honesty about the complexity of seeking justice, about the temptation of revenge, and about the hard work of healing. "I almost became the villain in my own story," Naomi said. "I was so focused on making Julian Cross pay that I nearly lost sight of who I was and who I wanted to be. Revenge is seductive because it feels like control, like power. But it's actually the opposite. It's letting the person who hurt you continue to control your choices, your actions, your life. Real power," Naomi continued, "comes from choosing to heal instead of choosing to harm. From building something new instead of just destroying something old. From being the person you want to be, not the person your pain wants you to become." After the speech, dozens of people approached Naomi. Some were victims of similar situations. Others were struggling with their own desires for revenge. All of them were looking for permission to choose something different. Naomi gave it to them, because she'd learned that lesson the hardest way possible. 5 years after everything began, Naomi received a letter. It was from Julian Cross, written from federal prison. Naomi almost threw it away without reading it. She'd moved on, built a new life, found peace. She didn't need anything from Julian Cross. But curiosity won. She opened the letter. It was short. Naomi, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you were right in your testimony. What I did to you and others was wrong. Not illegal, wrong. I spent my entire life believing that success justified any method, that winners write history and losers are forgotten. Prison has given me time to understand how hollow that philosophy was. I destroyed talented people to feed my ego. I hurt you because I could, because you trusted me, because I saw brilliance in you that I wanted to own rather than celebrate. You would have been well within your rights to destroy me completely. Instead, you chose justice. That choice saved other people from being victimized. It also gave me something I didn't deserve, a chance to face what I'd done, to actually reckon with the damage I'd caused. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your choice mattered. It mattered to the people you helped by pursuing justice. And it mattered to me, even though I have no right to matter to you. I hope you found peace. Julian, Naomi read the letter 3 times. She thought about responding, but ultimately decided against it. This wasn't about Julian anymore. His journey was his own, his regret his own to carry. But she kept the letter, not as a trophy, not as validation, but as a reminder. A reminder that choosing not to become a monster, even when you have every reason to become one, is the hardest and most important choice you can make. Today, Naomi runs a nonprofit organization that provides legal support and resources to victims of corporate intellectual property theft. She works with young innovators, teaching them how to protect their work and themselves. She speaks publicly about her experience, not to shame Julian Cross, but to help others find paths to justice and healing. She still carries scars from what Julian did to her. Some wounds never fully heal. But she also carries something more important, the knowledge that she faced her darkest impulses and chose light instead. She almost took dangerous revenge on the billionaire who wronged her. Almost let rage transform her into someone unrecognizable. Almost let his betrayal define the rest of her life. Instead, she chose to reclaim her life, her name, her work, and her integrity. Julian Cross took 3 years from her, but she didn't give him any more. And that, Naomi realized, was the most powerful revenge of all: living well, building good things, helping others, and refusing to let someone else's cruelty poison who she chose to be. So here's my question for you. If someone betrayed you and destroyed your life, would you choose justice or revenge? Drop justice in the comments if you believe healing is more powerful than hurting back. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more intense, emotional stories about resilience, redemption, and the choices that define us. Share this with someone who needs to hear that you can survive betrayal without becoming bitter, that you can seek accountability without losing yourself in the process.